Hi, everyone. This is Reverend Kenneth Price on Wednesday, December 3rd, and I'm here with Mary again. And today, the topic found us. We're going to talk about worth.
Yeah.
Worth being attached to, let's pick our poison, Mary. My worth was attached to two things: my looks and my money. What
Yeah.
better topic could we have for real talk? So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to record this
No.
for YouTube. So pick up where you left off. Just stream
Yeah.
of
I was
consciousness.
just saying that, now that I'm 60, almost 61 years, you kind of wonder now, what am I worth? Because, like I said, growing up, I was told I was beautiful. I'm so pretty. I'm this and that. And yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not anything that I'm bragging about. It's just the truth. It's just how it was.
Speaking.
And then when you start, you know, your hormones go crazy and you start getting gray hair, which clearly I don't have.
Yeah,
Um,
somewhere under there, but keep going.
uh, it's humbling. It's very humbling, and I think I did rely on that a lot, not really consciously. I didn't really think I did, and in fact, I would always kind of, brush aside the compliments and you know, because you're kind of taught don't bring attention to yourself, don't brag, don't, all that kind of stuff.
Which is
So
actually more ego, by the way, but keep going.
I know, well, it
No.
is, but it's hard to navigate that kind of thing,
Well,
really.
without these metaphysics, it's not hard. It's impossible. We're either more than or less than. Up, down, right? Like, and for our YouTube audience, what started this conversation was, Mary said to me when I came on to Zoom like this, and Mary said, "Take off your hat," and I said, "Well, I'm losing my hair, Mary, and I'm self-conscious about it. I used to be the young, pretty A-list party boy in the gay scene, and you know what it's like for a gay man to start losing his looks, and because I had a woman who said once recently to me, she said, "Do you know what it's like for a woman to lose her looks?" And I said, "Yes, I do, because I've been in the gay community for 40 years. So we are partners in crime. It's the same exact." But that leads to the conversation of worth, which is a valuable conversation. Because I grew up in the same thing, the same dynamics you did. Well, of course, money. That was my father since I was a young, because it was, we come from old money, worth. And I
Right.
mean, talk about brainwashing. No disrespect. Well, yeah, a little bit of disrespect to my father, but also then I came out at 18, the beautiful blonde surfer from Orange County, walked into a gay bar when I was 18 years old, and suddenly everyone wanted to get to know who's that beautiful young thing. And suddenly I had worth there. So, it
Right.
took until my senior years before the hair, started falling out, and I started getting the old man looks that I could really, and that this work really began to find me. I've been trying to compromise my whole life. I want my worth. I want my money. I want my looks, and I want to be enlightened. I
Yeah.
couldn't. Maybe somebody out there can leave a YouTube comment, but it wasn't until the money began to, that money. I'm not going to get into a real deep conversation about that on this, but that money and those looks, that I finally realized, all right, I surrender. I'm losing my identity as a wealthy, young, gay, pretty boy. It was an identity, is what I discovered.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's when reconnection began to finally start coming online. So, there's the conversation, worth and reconnection. It's your turn now.
Did you ever, like, there was a time I probably wouldn't have come on this video without makeup on. And I'm like, screw it. I don't care. I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just not going to do it. I'm Pamela Anderson now because she doesn't wear makeup, I guess. But I find still, I don't know if it's possible. Maybe it is for people to completely dissolve ego. But when someone does offer me a compliment, I think that I I don't necessarily fish for them. I hope I don't. If I do, then I need to work on that. But um I I say thank you, but my body tells me they're lying. That's not true.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's start, unpacking that. You know, because I go through the same thing, Mary. If you're complimenting me, there's an undercurrent, like there's got to be a catch. It can't be true. I and this is what the kind of the mind this all ties into A Course in Miracles, of course. So I want to keep it grounded in our path, because that's my ego's voice.
Right.
That drunk monkey living inside my head going bananas, saying, yeah, but yeah, come on. It's almost like, I mean, how would you describe it? We all, everyone has it, and we're all trying to suppress it, ignore it, fight it, and
Mhm.
then we either get develop addictions, go nuts, go crazy,
Right.
or hopefully find a path where we can start unwinding that voice, or this unbelieving that voice, because I live with that voice all day long, and I've just finally had to surrender to it, and that's when I began to wake up or grow up. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, I think that for me, when I hear someone give me a compliment, I don't know whether to necessarily believe it, maybe agree with it or not, because I think that, someone else's perception of me is their perception, right? But then maybe I'm questioning their uh honesty about it. Maybe I'm questioning, it's really a look into myself. It's a look into myself, because I think when I give someone a compliment, am I being honest with it? Or am I just giving them a compliment because I want them to like me, or because I really don't believe it, but I think that they should have a compliment? So
Well,
I wonder if it's a testament to really how I think about myself.
some of the dynamics I've noticed, which has excluded me from a lot of circles, which is for the best. I just ought not, attend some of those dinner parties. Is people? I noticed people were stroking one another, ego stroking,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I honestly don't know what to do with that anymore. I because once upon a time I was looking for ego strokes and giving ego strokes,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's like doing a line of cocaine. You get
Yeah.
a temporary high, it wears off. There's a crash, and you got to have more.
Right.
It's so so I think that's part of this conversation as well that we're noticing. I've been here in the house for almost 5 weeks alone, and I've really been with a lot of this stuff. I haven't gone out of the house looking for. I mean, I've been going to work, but I haven't been looking for a lot of. I haven't been looking for new social fixes, which is
Hmm.
something that I've even spiritual, social, even spiritually social. I've been
Yeah.
5 weeks just sitting with my own thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm
And
kind of
that's
making
hard.
peace. Well,
That's
it only took me 58 years.
well, I got three on you almost. I I I find that distractions are way easier, because to just sit here with your thoughts is difficult, and maybe we shouldn't be thinking all the time. I'm always looking for another new thing, and that ties in with what I was gonna say earlier, when we really didn't have a topic, about relationships and loyalty in a relationship, because I don't know that I'm particularly loyal, because it's not that I don't love a person, it's not that I don't want to be around them. Mostly I feel like they maybe really don't want me to be too much for them. Um, but I find that I go to, maybe I have ADD, I don't know, to like this other shiny thing, like, oh, now there's this person who likes me, and now there's this person who likes me. So I tend to to do that. And I don't I don't really, maybe I don't really understand relationships very well,
Well,
truly.
can I repeat what you said, because it's we could almost do a whole Zoom call on this. You said I shouldn't be thinking all the time. I
Yeah,
went
yeah.
through that roommate I had in Portland who said, used to just scream at me. He'd say, "Be thoughtless, be thought." I mean, he was kind of he was kidding in a way, but no, he was serious. He said, "Be." Finally, he would slow down. He wasn't kidding. He was saying, "Be thoughtless." You know,
Yeah.
we we pride ourselves on our thinking, and us intelligent ones, oh, we really pride ourselves. Look, I can, I can get all these college degrees. Look how smart I am. You're right. When it comes to relationships, boy, that's where rubber hits the road, because they're just, I spent all that time with David Hoffmeister, and he
Hmm.
he specializes in relationships, because he says they're just mirrors,
They are.
and
But
that's
we don't really see that. I think that holding the mirror up is hard.
well,
Mm.
he doesn't leave any room for he doesn't leave any wiggle room for compromise. There's no such thing as anybody not being a mirror. And boy, is now talk about a spiritual path. And most of us haven't. I mean, we haven't been taught how to hold up the mirror and not try and battle the reflection. It was my
Right.
story, at least. No, I'm not. No, I'm. Guess what, Kenneth? Yeah, you are. At least your persona is. But you see, this is why it's so important for us to get reconnected. Connected underneath all the static. There's just only one spirit running through all of us. But there's, this 8 billion different schizo. You think you have ADHD? Of course, all 8 billion egos have ADHD and schizophrenia and bipolar and borderline personality. All 8 billion. If you think you're a human being, I mean, that's Muji. Listen to Muji. He calls it the poison of personhood.
Yeah.
It's no wonder I'm
Yeah.
not popular at those dinner parties.
It's funny because now I have a harder time. I used to be able to, when I was younger, voice my opinion. I didn't really care what people thought about me. I would tell it like it is. I would tell it straight. And then something happened. I don't know what, where I felt like I had to um acclimate to everybody else. I felt like I had to um, you know, tell everybody how wonderful they were, and just to be liked, you know. And I don't know, there's got to be a balance in there somewhere. And going back to looks, well, you can use your looks to gain a friendship or to gain a relationship, but that doesn't take you very far. you
and
know
they usually end in divorce.
that yeah,
Well,
yeah.
they it was funny. I was watching a reel the other day, and someone asked Elizabeth Taylor. They said, "Elizabeth Taylor, was it a liability for you to be so beautiful?" And she stopped and she paused and she said, "No, it just didn't mean anything." She could get real. I always love Elizabeth,
Yeah.
but she
Yeah.
she said it just didn't mean anything. It's kind of like
Right.
Jim
And she was
Carrey.
married 8 times, something like that.
Yeah, it took her 8 times. It took her until her later senior years to finally get it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we shouldn't feel like we're far behind.
Yeah. Well, that's true. There's still time, maybe. I don't I don't know, because I recently had a discussion with a lifelong friend of mine, and we've had a little bit of a falling out. Not really anyone's fault in particular, but um I hurt her in a way that I didn't really know. And this was many years ago, but it just recently surfaced. And she told me that she's loyal to a fault. And I internalized that as, well, then I must not be. If she's saying that to me,
My
then
mind does the exact same thing. Keep going. I want to talk about that. Share with me.
yeah, yeah. And so when she said, I am loyal to a fault, she is a loyal person. And I, appreciate her for everything that she is, even though she can be a harsh person. She can, irritate you, but we all do that. I really internalized that as she must think I'm not then, a loyal person. So
Look at how fast
that's
the
that's
ego
been
runs.
bothering me for a while.
This is what Byron Katie always tells people. She says, write it down on paper. She said, the minute that thought comes into your mind, put it on paper. She says, it's like lightning. That thought came into your mind immediately after. I mean, the ego is right there, sitting there just waiting for the it's like I when I wake up in the morning, I open my eyes and all of a sudden, I get a moment of light, clarity, and next thing you know, the ego wakes up. You know, it's
It does. And I chastise myself nearly every day for it
well,
because I let her down. I let her down. And now I'm kind of afraid to reach out to talk about it more. I don't really want to because it's scary. Um, and I really truly don't want to rehash. I mean, there are things that I could bring up that I won't. Grievances. And there's no point. There's really no point in it because I love her and that's it. You know.
well, what you've just described is guilt. I mean,
Yes.
I wish I had that app in front of me, the ACIM.org, and see how many times Jesus uses the word guilt in the Course of Miracles. But I was watching a Zoom call with Keith Kavanaugh, which I listened to all of his archives, and he said, I think he was the one who said, if you scratch down underneath guilt, you're going to find shame, and
Oh yeah.
shame and worthiness are shaking hands. We what was it? I have that same too. I live with I'm going to have to work on my vocabulary. So here's how I want to rephrase that. My ego is constantly, just screaming at me, you did this wrong. You did that wrong. You did. It's no wonder I have a history of addictions. I was just trying to silence that voice, you know, and
Right.
that's the magic of this path is that he's got, it took him 1,400 pages to try and convince us that that's not our voice. That's those thoughts don't mean anything. They don't have any substance. They don't even belong to us. So let's not take the bait. That's my mind training. Don't take the bait, Kenneth. Don't pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's drunk monkey. Any metaphor that we can find that can help us back away from that drunk monkey.
Yeah. I don't know if I mean, talking about these things almost makes me feel shameful in terms of I'm I have a lot of shame throughout my life for different reasons, and I'm kind of ashamed that I'm talking about them.
That listen, secrets cannot live in the light. You just brought that into the light, and it's going through the alchemy work right there, because that was mine too. I heard that from I love my mother, I love my father, but God rest their souls, no disrespect, do not tell the neighbors. That's not
Right.
to leave this. I remember I was 16 years old, and my mother, she went into the hospital. Serious. She had pancreatitis. I woke up, came downstairs. Mom was gone. Dad was at the counter, and I said, "Where's Mom?" He said, "I took her to the hospital now last night." He said, "Now go to school and don't tell anyone." Well,
Don't tell anyone your mother's in the hospital.
with
Okay.
pancreatitis, because it was
Yeah.
connected to her drinking. So,
Right.
as a kid, I was completely disassociated by 16. Don't
Sure.
ask dad any questions and just do what he said. Go to school now. So, I went to school, came home, and Diana from next door, she wanted to borrow the crystal punch bowl. So she met me outside when she saw me, entering the driveway, and she said, "Kenny, is your mom home?" And I wasn't thinking, "Oh no, she's in the hospital." What?
Oh Lord.
Diana was my mom's close friend.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, my whole body just shut down in shame. Oops, I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to tell anybody. I was bad. I was wrong. I mean, Mike
And
was
it
back.
just came out.
It just came out. Oh no, she's in the hospital. I mean,
Yeah.
so
And
I mean
that
that's the same feeling you described to me. Don't tell anyone. Keep this is compartmentalized. Edit your thoughts before they come out. Well, no, I don't.
right. You just have to be yourself. And that is hard because we have I have things that have happened within my marriage, um, that people don't know about. And um, I don't necessarily want people to know about it. Um, it's not that I just don't feel like it's necessary for the whole world to know. I mean, people
Yeah.
can't process it in a way that is of compassion or understanding, you know. And my kids had to see a lot of um fighting and just stuff. And um, I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed that I put them through that. And they don't ever act like they're upset with me for it, but I know it has affected them.
You brought up a good point. I'm an enigma. I blurt everything out to the whole world, but not everyone's in the category of enigma. A lot of this is for confidentiality amongst people we can trust. That's what therapists are for. You pay a therapist because it's a relationship of confidentiality.
Sure. Sure. Oh
I
shoot, I might have you're
you
stuck.
froze. You froze for a second.
Yeah,
Okay, are you still frozen? Can you see me?
I can see you now.
No,
Yeah.
it's there. I'm unstuck. It's my, and this internet's been acting really funny. But yeah, I hope it records fine. But we'll just keep going because it goes off and on. But anyway, my mental health began to come online when I began to expose, because I was so determined that I just said, basically, I said fuck it. I said, I'm just going to start airing my dirty laundry all over the internet, and all of a sudden, it didn't turn out to be dirty. It didn't turn out to be.
Yeah.
Everyone said, instead of my worst fears, everyone's saying, "Oh, shame on you! I can't believe you did that." Instead of that, people began coming out of the woodwork saying, "Oh my God, that's been in my life too."
That's
It's
me. Yeah.
like, yeah, and that's how you and I found each other. Um, so just the opposite happened. I'm sitting here kind of laughing at all those fears that I had. That my reputation would be tarnished if I told everybody my deepest secrets. But just the opposite happened. It all turned out to be an illusion. Nobody cared.
Yeah. Well, true. I mean, I don't know. I think that it depends on who you it's easier to air those things to people who are not necessarily close to you. I think sometimes the people who are closer to you are the more judgmental people. And maybe because they feel closer to you and that they want you to see what you've done or whatever, they feel comfortable in saying that. Um, so if something happens to somebody else, you look at it as if it's over there, you know. But if that same thing happens to you, it's a whole different process. You process it completely differently, even if it's the exact same thing.
Are you talking about karma?
So I think that in my mind, why aren't we upset with it when when it happens to someone else, or we distance, it's okay, it's over there, we don't think about it. But when it happens to us, it's horrible.
I think I want to go above the battleground with this because I think everything it actually the Course in Miracles is actually very simple. The message is very simple. And what we just do is we complicate it. Uh, it goes back to Muji, and it goes back to all these different mystics are just basically saying this is all part of a game. It's part of a movie. It's part of a screenplay.
Hmm.
The only way I was able to I could never fix. I tried to fix the relationships with my family. I
Hmm.
tried and I tried, and you know what? The more I tried, the worse they got. It was like
Yeah.
flypaper. I was stuck in a spider web. When you're in quicksand, do not flail. You're just going to sink further. Stop,
Right.
pray, and ask to be shown. I mean, I'm humbled. It took me into my 50s before I realized what the Course in Miracles was saying. He says in the Course in Miracles, you need do nothing. He's telling us that if we just stop and pray, that's when I started to back off the movie screen and practice the mind training. Work at the level of the mind. The level. Don't trying to fix a relationship is the character on the screen trying to fix another character on the screen. It just ends up into the Jerry Springer show. It won't work.
Right. Right.
But we all have to try that and figure it out for ourselves. And it usually takes us into our senior years, hopefully. So if I can have the mental discipline to watch my thinking, that's where I began to notice that maybe you can help me out here. What's the point I'm trying to make? I'm now able
You're
to.
you're observing you're you're observing the observer.
We have to become the observer,
Yeah.
and that's when I began to realize there's the only intimacy I'm going to find in at all is between myself and creator. I we all want intimacy from another person, and if we can get it, that's great. But that's the moment I go looking for it. It's like Danger Will Robbins. I've got to get reconnected now. But how do I get reconnected? Well, enter Course in Miracles. It's a reverse engineering. I can't. No one can reconnect. I'm going to try and reconnect to God. Well, that's old Christian. I don't. I didn't have any success with that. But when I began to reverse engineer and say that thought isn't true, that thought's not who I am, that thought is my ego, then it began to push the darkness aside. A Course in Miracles is move the darkness aside or unbelieve in the darkness, and the light is just a given. And I began to connect with myself and with others for the first time after decades.
Hmm. But do you think that it's hard to believe it? When you for so long saw yourself as shameful, when you for so long sat in darkness, and for me, it's been about the last 5 to 7 years. Um, for various reasons. Um, it's hard to believe that there's light inside. It's hard to believe that that is really why I'm here, that that is my true identity.
Well, your first question to me was, is it hard? Yeah, it's simple. Is it easy? No. I mean, mind training is I have to do mind training 24/7. And I want to bring in something you said earlier in this conversation. You said you distract still. Yeah, me too. YouTube,
Yeah.
in the middle of the night. I Of course I still distract. I'm not enlightened. If I were enlightened, I would.
You
But
probably wouldn't have your body.
all right, let's kind of bring this into a children's book that came to mind. You remember the Velveteen Rabbit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. See, it's we don't need a course in
Can't
miracles.
wait to be a real rabbit,
Well, what? How long
right?
did it take the rabbit to become a real bunny? No, hairs.
Until it was torn and
There it is.
hmm
I mean, if we didn't already have a topic for this YouTube, I would prefer to name it the Velveteen Rabbit over Worth, because I mean
worth, yeah,
we don't need the Course in Miracles if we can fully digest the Velveteen Rabbit at this stage at least. Velveteen
right.
Rabbit became real.
Yeah. And it took
Took.
wear. It took
Yep.
it became tattered, torn, worn,
There you go.
but fully loved.
Velveteen Rabbit looked in the mirror and saw what was there the whole time. Or it took the identity. See, that's a metaphor for this world. It had all that identity, which of beauty and youth and desirability. All it had to, be stripped away to see what was underneath the whole time. So your question to me was, I think, how do I believe to be assured in the light? I don't know. But listen to Byron Katie. She says, "Oh, are you a believer?" Now that throws, cold water on the Christian narrative. Just believe, just believe. Well, no, he doesn't. He says, allow all this stripping to take place. It's going to take place whether we like it or not. It's going to happen. We only have two choices. We're going to go down willingly, or we're going to go down with a fight. It doesn't
Right.
matter. We're all going to. We've all got it. He just says, "I don't want you to suffer along the way." We're all going to wake up. You can't not wake up because it does strip away. The thing is that we want to go down peacefully or make it miserable for ourselves. Doesn't matter.
Maybe a little bit of both. I think sometimes we start down the path of making it miserable
Yeah.
and then decide that's no fun. I had a conversation with my son last night about something political, sort of. And you know, formerly I would have sat and just stood my ground and been right and you're wrong and whatever. And I really really see myself in him because at his age he is in that sort of phase of the way I think is the right way. I don't think the way I think is the right way. I just think how I think, and interpret things the way I interpret them. But when he told me I was brainwashed, I I said, okay, I accept that. I didn't fight it. I didn't defend myself. I just allowed him to say whatever he wanted to say. So so I guess that's a little bit of growth, maybe. And to let it go and to just say, that those things are so silly to argue over anyway. That they have no meaning, or at least
Well,
shouldn't have so much meaning that you need to become identified with it.
I I mean, I love talking to you, Mary, because we come up with topic after topic after
I
topic.
know. I'm sorry if I keep talking about different stuff.
No, I
I
love
don't.
it because you know me, I love to do those graphics on social media, brainwashing. Yeah, I'd love to have someone. I'd love Jesus to wash my brain. God, it's full of,
We're all brainwashed in whatever way. Hmm.
well, conditioned. I
Conditioned. Yeah.
conditioned to, fit into a world which we weren't designed for. No,
Right.
duality is the soul is not designed for duality.
You're right.
I was just outside putting I got a load from Lowe's today, so I wanted to put my car in the driveway. So I wanted to move my godfather's car out of the driveway, and the sun was shining. I couldn't see out the mirror, and I thought, God, I'll tell you the first thought that came to me. God damn this body! I'm sick of living in a human body. Oh my God, I can't believe I just had that thought. Well, it was
I
true.
think that all the time.
I like it's getting more. When I was young, I didn't have those thoughts because the body was energetic. The body had boundless energies. The body, didn't have problems, getting in up and down off the floor. And I did a drywall ceiling, this week. And when I was young, you just lift drywall, and you sand the ceiling. And I came home and I collapsed for 6 hours. I said, my body's getting old. It's getting harder and harder to do the drywall on the ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our
Brains tell us we can do it. Our bodies say, sorry.
How did that tie into what you were saying? I don't know where I'm just as stream of consciousness as you. Maybe that's why.
I know. I was talking about having that political conversation with my son.
Brainwashing.
Brainwashing. Yeah, we were talking about brainwashing.
That must be. I don't have any kids, but I do have a nephew. He's not a nephew, not by blood, but he's 28. And he's gonna, he's going out on business. He leaves for business for months at a time. So I said, I got to grab him before he goes. So I said, come over here for a bottle of wine. So he
Mm-hmm.
came over here, and it was like, it was kind of hard on me, Mary. I'll tell you why. Because it's not hard. That's not the right word. He's a 28 years old, and he's got to make a mark in the world. 28-year-olds have got to go out there, and they've got to give it all. And he's smart, and he's well adjusted, and he's handsome, and he's doing a great job. But I kind of said back after, and this was great. I did the best I could. But after he left, and I realized, what's my role in his life? And I just heard, not yet. I love that kid to death, but he's off on his own, and right now my offerings are not. He doesn't need my offerings, which is fine. That's why I'm freed up to put the work into this ministry, but we all have to go out there and really develop a sense of self. And then it has to start unraveling sometime. It's going to be different for each person in their story.
Right. Well, it's different phases of life. I mean, the ego is necessary for us to navigate through this world.
Yeah.
At certain points of our life, and to be able to defend ourselves, to stand up for ourselves. I think if you live purely of your soul, you wouldn't have to do any of that. You wouldn't have to defend yourself. There's nothing to defend. There's nothing to prove. There's nothing to be worthy of.
Well, Keith,
and that's hard. That's hard because the ego wants to be worthy. The ego wants to be seen. The ego wants to be validated. All of those things. And I just don't want to live like that anymore.
Well, so what you're doing is, let me put that into Course in Miracles language. You're said a prayer. The prayer goes like this: there's got to be a better way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's what started the whole Course in Miracles in 1965. Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford got together and, Bill went to Helen and says, there's got to be a better way. And Helen
Right.
said, yes, Bill, there's got to be a better way, and I'll help you find it. And then boom, Jesus started dictating to her.
And that's I don't know if I'm just very obtuse and I don't see or hear responses. And maybe there are signs, but I either don't want to see them or I can't right now. Because when I pray those things, every once in a while I'll have a thought about it, but then I think, well, that's just my ego thinking. That's not really a sign. That's not really I feel like I need to be slapped in the face and shown, like, hello, Mary, this is your freaking sign. This is what you are supposed to be doing. This is what your path is. I don't see it. I
Well,
just don't.
I tell you, yeah, because if you're in the past and future, it's all going to be invisible. Right now, in this moment, it's clear as day to me. You and I join every Wednesday. It's just that we're telling God what it's supposed to look like. God,
Yeah.
I know what it's supposed to look like. No, we don't. It's right
No.
in front of us, showing up every single day. We just, we don't know what anything means. We don't know what anything's for. It's right in front of us. God, it's a. I hear what you're saying though. I go
But
through
it's
that.
but our purpose, I see other people and they have their families and I have a family. Um, but largely throughout my life I've been a little bit dissociated from it. Um, I don't know why. I just have. Um, and it's not purposeful. It's not, purposeful, but I can see that in myself. That's a pattern I have with a lot of things, being dissociated. I had a job when I was 16 and my cousin was my supervisor. I worked at a retail store and I would go after school, in my little Catholic girl uniform and, do my job there. But one day I was rearranging the clothing on the racks and my cousin called me into her office and she sat me down and she asked me if I was doing drugs.
But
And I said, I was dumbfounded. I would be more inclined to do drugs now than I would have back then. That's for sure. Um, I didn't really understand why, but looking back on it, I realized that I was even dissociated from that. I wasn't present in my job. I wasn't seeing it as a responsibility. I was just seeing it as something I was supposed to do, like I was being forced to do it. So that's sort of the same way in my family, my kids and everything. I always felt like it was a job, that I was being forced to do and that I had to do it.
we've
And
got a
so
lot.
maybe that's what causes dissociation from it.
Well, still, Dave, I know exactly what David Hoffmeister would say to that. All 8 billion people who are disconnected are going through disassociation. You know, when I was uh, 17, my grandfather, took me on a fishing trip. And I guess he was a sweet old man. I think he knew his days were numbered. And he really wanted to get to know his grandson. It was quite a gift. And I mean, I was really shut down as a teenager, completely, talk about disassociation. I
Mhm.
said to him something that he heard. He listened to me. He said, how's school going, Kenny? And I said, Grandpa, I have a mental block. because my mom said, Kenneth, she said, Kenny, she said, you are very bright. I see these SAT scores. She says, what gives? You know,
You hated going.
she said, she said, you're scoring the 98th percentile with reading comprehension. She said, why do you hate school? I said, I don't know. It's boring. Can't stand it. But it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that. I said, I, I, I really truly exposed to my grandfather. I was blocking it all out. Block, block, block.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. They didn't want us to fly, public schools, fly free. What are you interested? What's your passion? No, they said, sit down, shut up, and do the math.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You learn calculus, you learn geometry, and then reading and writing was important. And thank God I paid attention on my typing class. Other than that, I'm sorry. I'm not very keen on public education. Much ado about nothing. You know, I had my first my and then what did I do? I decided to go to college and study finance. You know what happened? I had a complete meltdown. I had the meltdown by the time I was, how old was I? 20 when I had my 21. I had my first meltdown. Finance? Talk about.
I was. That's why I'm like.
I finished the degree, by the way. I mean, I'm a stubborn SOB. I actually walked with a bachelor's in finance, and I as soon as I took that diploma, I wanted nothing to do with that field of study.
Yeah.
But because I saw what it did to me, it shut me down completely. I didn't do any art. I didn't do nothing passionate. And I was following the rules. My father said, oh, you can't do art for a living. You can only do it as a hobby, but you've got to find a practical degree. How many of us heard that one? Practical, yeah, fine to be practical and be a nut house the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
we have to follow our spirit
Yeah.
gave us gifts and talents. I don't know. Mine certainly wasn't finance.
Well, the world is structured in a certain way that, you know, if you want to make money, if you want to survive, these are the things that you're rewarded for. You're rewarded for being an astute businessman. You're rewarded for being a fine mathematician or a scholar of medicine or, those creative things aren't necessarily rewarded. I wanted to be a dancer. I took dance for many years and um, you know, your parents who, rightfully so, they want you to succeed, but they say, well, you have to have something to fall back on. And so you internalize that as you're not good enough to make it in the other way. So you have to do this other thing. Ended up being what I did, obviously, because I didn't feel confident enough to pursue anything else.
you know,
So we follow those rules.
until we collapse. And every,
Hmm.
you know, I wrote an essay, and I haven't. It was on my own Facebook page. I want to revisit it for the ACIM Facebook pages, but the name of it was
Hmm.
"As the World Approaches the Borderland." And I don't have time right now, but I know there was somewhere in the. But capitalism has now reached its zenith. This conversation went in the direction of capitalism. I brought up finance. Basically,
Hmm.
capitalism is based on a principle of scarcity. There's
Right.
and fear. Three components: fear, lack, and scarcity.
Hmm.
Why else would parents
Absolutely.
have given us such errant messages? It's
Well,
because
it's true. We're afraid.
yeah. Now
I
that's
think that your parents probably, I don't know how, my parents were born in the 1930s. And,
the depression.
their parents were the Great Depression. And they lived through that survival. They lived through that. I don't know that it affected them as it did some people, but it was fear. And so, those things that are going to bring you money and security, at least
No,
financial security, stability, that is where they directed you, you know.
I would
Now I
love.
think we've gotten so far the other way, that it's killing our spirits.
I would like to unpack that someday. We can't do it this evening, but I often have asked myself that same question because, I heard all that too. We grew up in the Depression. We didn't have this, but my family was disconnected. See, there was a
Mm-hmm.
caveat there. Is I often wonder the people that were connected to spirit probably weathered the Depression without all of that, without all of that. You see,
Mm-hmm.
if you're disconnected and life throws at you scarcity, it's going to create all those errant messages. I had my Okay, let me just call it out. He's been dead for a very long time. He's been dead for 40 years, so I can speak it. The man died in 1986 with he was, and when he died, we found out he was worth $5 million, which
Okay.
today would probably be about 10. It's quite a bit of money for an old
Mm-hmm.
man, $5 million.
Yeah.
And so after he died, my dad said, Kenny, can you want to house sit while we put the house up for sale? And I said sure. And he said I'll pay you some money. Just make sure it stays well kept. And every time a realtor calls, they can show, because realtors want to come in. So I went around the house, and one of the realtors came over and said, something's wrong around here. And I go, what's wrong? And he said, have you got a ladder? I said, yeah. Grandpa kept one here in the closet. And he climbed up, and he started unscrewing the light bulbs, and he said, these are all 25-watt light bulbs. He said, you can't show a house like this. He said, Kenny, do you have any 100-watt light bulbs? And he said, Kenny, who was living in this house? You need 100-watt light bulbs. No one can see the house. And he started screwing in all these light bulbs. All of a sudden the house started coming. And I said, Grandpa, he had done that his whole life to save money. The man was worth $5 million, and he put
Right.
25-watt light bulbs to save on money.
Right. Oh
Scarcity.
yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Grandpa, I love you, but
I I think that I think that's kind of sweet, really. But you're right. I mean, I had two old maid aunts that were the same way. We used to tease the one because she was kind of heavy into the stock market, so people would always trip over themselves. And Helen, can we do anything for you? Can you do anything for you? It was a joke, but she did. I don't know how much money she had, but when she died, my parents were able to build a new house and do different things. But they had things in their house that were so funny. One of their refrigerators in the basement was not plugged in, and when you opened it up, it was filled with toilet paper and and paper towels. And their pantry downstairs was just, it was like a cellar. It was chock full of
I know.
canned goods and all kinds of things. And they didn't need all that. But like you say, it was scarcity. It was their mindset.
And this, I want to bring this back to our mind training Course in Miracles. As we
Hmm.
start to, we've got a few more minutes, but um,
Hmm.
my mind training is it's no accident that his name was Kenneth Price, and I am Kenneth Price. My grandpa, I'm starting to look like him, by the way. You know, I noticed the patterns in myself.
Yeah.
I am living in. I have to watch my scare. I still have that tape running up here. Scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. I'm always
Yeah.
checking my bank account. Oh, I earned money with that was a lucrative job, hanging that sheetrock. I better save it. I better save it because I need new devices. I better save it because what happens in case. You know, it, my they would have. It's My family would have considered this way of life heresy. Following spirit was heresy because
Hmm.
that's irresponsible. Responsible people scrimp and save. So we're unwinding, generational beliefs. You and I together. This goes
True.
back. This is
Well, if you look, I mean, Yeshua, Jesus lived that way. He lived in spirit. He didn't live in,
on the mount.
I mean, he did jobs. He worked his way through from town to town, relied on people's kindness. Uh, was not, in fact, probably one of the biggest things he preached against was greed, money and greed.
You know, my father said to me, he was so proud that I chose finance. Well, he said,
He could tell his buddies about you.
well, we're sitting at the right before, the whole thing exploded, in the late 80s. He used to have a habit. He used to like to take his fist and pound the table to make when he had a point to make. And he said, greed is good. And I don't know if you've ever studied finance, but when I got to that last finance class, I realized greed is what runs corporations. I said, I can't believe this. This is the very last finance class. You're going to hand me a diploma in 3 months' time, and this is awful. It's disgusting. Now, so and obviously, look at the Trump administration, it's an oligarchy we're living in now. So truly, but this is how I want to leave this, kind of wrap this up. When we're following spirit, we're operating from there's a different operating system that comes online. There truly are synchronicities that we have for us, that people, it's closed off for those in the capitalistic system. But when we begin to shed all these layers, and I've watched it happen in my life, when we begin to get honest and get real, then something comes underneath us and begins to give us a GPS, a compass, and it's a way of life that is not going to contain drama. It's not going to contain loneliness. It's not going to embody all. It's certainly not going to be a fertilizer for when you're living inside of the capitalistic system, you're mentally ill, mental illness. And you cover it all up. Well,
And become that way.
This way of life is going to procure love. It's either two emotions, either love or fear. It's that simple.
Right.
A little bit of a sermon.
It's hard to choose. It's hard not to be in fear for me.
Well,
it really is.
Let's unpack that next week. This is the problem I have. Just choose love. Well, no, just face your fears and face them. Do the alchemy. Get honest. You're going to discover none of them ever turned out to be true, and love has just been there the whole time waiting for us. How's that? We're running out of time. Mary, I love talking to you because and that's why I record these. We're unpacking this together.
Well, I'm glad you ground it and you bring it back, because I tend to go here, there, and everywhere. Things just come in, and then I just have to say it, So it's hard for me to stay on track.
Well, that's why I record these, because this is valuable conversation. So this has been Reverend Kenneth Price on Wednesday, December 3rd, and I have been here with Mary, and it's worth. That's the topic of this.
Worth.
And this is beautiful, Mary. We unpacked a topic that's really needed to unpack. So if you're watching this on YouTube, leave your comments below and join us Wednesday evenings at 5 p.m. Eastern. So much love, God bless, and may the force be.